You represent a number of women in civil cases against Sean Combs. What is your reaction to this verdict?
Well, I think it's important that we discuss the lack of diversity that was on the prosecution team. That was probably my most concern when I faced them.
I can't believe that you got up on here with 3-inch eyelashes and hooker makeup, trying to bring the color of skins into the court of law. Diversity doesn't matter here, just the truth. Piers Morgan and his team over there has a fantastic ability to bring together diametrically opposed opinions from across the internet, put it on his show, and have us all be entertained or even educated by the conversations at hand. They had one of these conversations yesterday, and the young lady's name who went off the wall, her name is Ariel Mitchell. Now, she's a lawyer who is also a lawyer in several of Diddy's civil cases against him. Now, she is an ardent shit talker of Diddy. And listen, I'm not going to be the person here in order to try to defend Diddy. Y'all know how I feel about him. But nevertheless, though, it is amazing to watch her emotional support of Cassie and then to watch how Piers Morgan just logically and calmly dismantles every point that she made. I mean, she's using the race card. She's using the gender card. It's absolutely pathetic. And I think that she's a perfect example of a lawyer you should never hire to protect or represent men or women, right? Because she will sabotage her own case right before your and the judge's very eyes. But before we get into the content from yesterday, I want to show a short of her performance a couple of months ago on the same Piers Morgan show.
I don't know anything about your life. I don't know if you're married, not married, in a relationship with whoever. But let me just ask you, would you arrange for somebody whose name is the Punisher to come and have sex with your partner for money?
If my man was a billionaire,
My man.
who had the influence, the reach, the power of someone like P. Diddy.
Here we
And
go.
he not only is my man,
Okay.
but he is my boss. And he has my life in his hand. And that's what he told me he was into. And that's what he told me he needed from me. How do I not do that?
Wow.
Whether or not I
Really?
like it or don't like
Really?
it, what choice do I have?
Again, Diddy ain't no saint, but this is before all of the information that painted Cassie as sort of a co-conspirator for a number of years, right? Having direct contact with some of these escorts. By the way, the escorts never reported seeing any type of coercion shit. The Punisher guy said that there wasn't even any drugs or alcohol being used. This is before they unraveled all of the text messages. All of the text messages all were in favor of freak-offs, and there was never any text messages that were shown where she said that she never wanted to. And this was before it was exposed that she was cheating with like Kid Cudi and some football player, right? Sounds more like a toxic relationship, a freaky toxic relationship, than all of this coercion that the Fed said Diddy did. Nevertheless, let's get into the content from yesterday. It's a treat.
They clearly have. Ariel Mitchell Kidd, you represent a number of women in civil cases against Sean Combs. What is your reaction to this verdict?
Well, I think it's important that we discuss the lack of diversity that was on the prosecution team. That was probably my most concern when I faced them when I had a hearing for a motion to quash during the grand jury testimony. I was very concerned when I was looking across from me at 6 white women and them not being able to grasp just exactly how to convey what has occurred to a jury and being able to relate these things to a jury.
Ma'am, did you prepare whatsoever, or is your faulty default matrix mechanism to call out race? I can't believe that you got up on here with 3-inch eyelashes and hooker makeup, trying to bring the color of skins into the court of law. Diversity doesn't matter here, just the truth of what happened. Do you really think that the jurors have not already been thoroughly vetted before being selected, that kind of argument is something that a judge would ignore and probably laugh at because it has no place in deciding justice. But on this broadcast, that's what you're leading with? If I was the judge, I'd be like, order! Order! Shut the fuck up!
Of course, my clients are very shocked at all of this. I am shocked. I'm actually very shocked at how they were able to reach the transportation aspect, but not the other two charges, because one kind of flows with the other.
Well, they don't though, really, do they? Because the transportation is that you're transporting people illegally across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. But that doesn't mean there's any coercion. And in fact, they have rejected all the charges, which would then lead on to a coercive situation.
Piers,
no sex trafficking.
You can't cut me off and let me not finish my statement.
Sure.
So in reference to, first of all, the bar they have to meet. It's a very, very high bar in criminal court. It is beyond a reasonable doubt. So of course it's clear that he did these things, transporting people for prostitution, like you just said, the Punisher, who you'll have later, and other men who have said they were transported, as well as the women who said, the Jane Does who said they were also transported for this reason. However, when we talk about the coercion, I thought the elements were met. If you are asking me where I think the prosecution fell short, was I think taking 6 weeks to put on their case was a mistake. It was overkill. I think had they shortened and streamlined their case, maybe in a 3-4 week at max point, they would have been successful.
And when you say first, she says she doesn't understand how he didn't get the trafficking, but yet the transportation, and Piers stops her and says, hey, you know those are two different. The main difference is threats, coercion, fraud. She then hops back in as if Piers is in the wrong. You would expect her then to explain exactly why she thinks that Diddy should have gotten the trafficking charge, and she literally didn't do that.
Prosecution team wasn't diverse enough. What exactly do you mean? What are you saying?
There were 6 white women, so there was not any other voice other than a white woman's voice being heard. There was not a man's voice, a man's perspective of any race, let alone any other race, especially a black voice, considering just how, I don't even know what the word impactful is, not even a good enough word to describe Diddy's.
Bruce Rivers like, what
impact, but that, again, that's not even a good enough word. His chokehold, I'll call it, on the black community. So when I look at, like, for example, R. Kelly, who, in my opinion, didn't do half as much or a quarter as much as Diddy did, for him to be in jail for 25 years.
R. Kelly is accused of touching children. What is this? This is an embarrassment, baby.
And Diddy to essentially be getting possibly 10 to 20 years, 10 years max on each count. I don't understand what Diddy did.
Could it be, Ariel?
And there was more evidence.
Could it be, Ariel, that we're just in different times? That when R. Kelly went down, we were still in the kind of full flow of the Me Too movement, the Time's Up campaign. There was a kind of, real zealous desire to put bad men away for long periods of time, Harvey Weinstein and others. And that the mood has changed somewhat now, and that people listen to the evidence,
for more
particularly
proof.
with Cassie Ventura, where, she settled with Diddy for, a lot of money, many millions of dollars, had her rent paid, that she, in all the text messages that were leaked, carried on sending him very loving text messages, talking openly about wanting to do the freak-offs. The Punisher, who I'm going to interview again a little later in the show, when I interviewed him, he was very persuasive that everything that he was involved in was not only consensual, but Cassie was the one driving it all. She was the one paying him. She was the one organizing everything. Diddy just sat in the corner watching them.
But let's be for real. Cassie didn't have her own money. So if that was the case, why did her parents need to take out a loan to pay Diddy for that $20,000?
But my question is whether
it's not that she didn't have a lot of money. It's that she wanted a particular lifestyle because she has expensive tastes. So when she needed it, the money was dried up.
Listen,
not
I'm not
Cassie
saying it's
had
right
this
or wrong.
money
I'm just saying.
And this was her thing to
Okay,
do.
but Ariel, you're missing my point. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying, do you feel like there's a different mood now about these cases?
I would hate. I was about to say I was trying to get to what your question was, which is, I would hate to think that the application of the law is on the whim of the attitude of the people. So that's what you're implying, that because the wind has changed, there's an inappropriate application of law, and I would hate to think that we live in a society where that is occurring.
Okay, Bruce Rivers, I mean, you were very confident that he was going to go down to prison for the rest of his natural life.
Listen, ma'am, you can close your eyes and cover your ears all you want, but this is exactly what happened during the height of the Me Too movement. People's decisions were absolutely swayed by the winds of so-called change, of having to stand up and fight against all of these different men. And no one can deny that. Now that people are less likely to just believe in requesting receipts, evidence, because they see that there have been liars all throughout it. But this is what happens when feminism can go into overdrive and can impact, in fact, the court of law. It breeds chaos and destroys the lies of men that were determined to be guilty until proven innocent. I've always maintained that I want the society to shift back towards more common sense. Value truth, value evidence. Do not value pure emotions, because when it runs wild, innocent people get locked up. Innocent people lose their livelihood. But anyway, there's some back and forth between everybody on the panel, and she comes back in about 10 minutes later. Let's watch.
True. Ariel, in terms of the women you represent with civil actions against Sean Combs, how much will this verdict affect those? I mean, does it make it more difficult now to win a civil case?
Before I get into that, I want to just address this verdict really just goes to show how much women are really truly not believed.
What if they're not telling the truth?
But who are you to tell somebody?
Well, who are you to tell a jury of 12 Americans?
Well,
you're implying. Hang on, Ariel. Hang on, Ariel.
20 years ago, but you're cutting me off, so we can.
No, you're cutting me off.
20 years ago or 10 years ago, as you just said, there was a movement with Me Too where women were actually starting to be heard, and now we're just going back to regular status quo.
No, that's not true. No,
treated as liars and martyrs.
No, hang on.
Story has to withstand scrutiny.
Hang on one sec. I was going to say, Ariel, just to be clear, they have been heard. Right? They went into a criminal court.
I said believed. I said we are back.
Can you not interrupt me, given you didn't want me interrupting you? Thank you. They have been heard for 6 weeks, and they weren't believed. So it's not a question of women not being heard. They've had their chance to try and prove their case, and so much evidence came out which contradicted what they had to say, including very powerful evidence from the Punisher, who I'm about to interview. But this idea that somehow this is about women being silenced, not being heard, and so on, the complete opposite has happened. And what you're actually doing is you're saying this jury of 12 Americans didn't know what they were doing or had some weird desire not to listen to women. It seems to me they listened very carefully to the evidence and they've reached a conclusion they didn't believe these women. And you know what, Ariel? Sometimes women lie.
I'm not saying...
Hold on, I gotta... Come on, Piers. Tell it like it is, baby. There is no correct conclusion for women like this unless the man suffers. They don't want to hear anything that Cassie could have done to contribute to the situation that she was in. Instead of focusing on the hardcore evidence, you want us to empathize based off of the feeling of deciding the faith of people. But isn't that what you don't want to happen? Didn't you just say that you don't want the court of law persuaded by feelings of a movement? You're going against your own logic. Now, let's watch a response, because her face is of that of she's about to snap 3 times into the screen and tell Piers Morgan off. Let's see.
But okay, who's saying that people lie? Women or men? Men lie, women lie. Numbers don't. So we all know that.
So why are you saying it's a throwback to when women weren't believed?
Women are not being believed. So there were 8 men on a jury who, again, I'm saying to say they heard them. I don't think they did. So believe them definitely, because you can't believe somebody if you not truly are listening to them. Why? Because you'll
that's
never
an
be
outrageous
put in their
slur. You've got
position.
no evidence
You will
they didn't listen to them.
No man on this panel, all three of you, will never be in a position of any woman in any scenario where you can be taken advantage of, where you can be literally
What
abused
are you talking
and then
about?
not be
How
heard
many
and
women
be
have taken
believed
advantage
after
of
the
me?
fact. So I'm just saying there are 3 men who will, and 8 men on that jury who will never know what it's like. And instead of trying to understand the position that a woman could be in, and a woman like Cassie and a woman like the other Jane Does who testified in this matter, they completely disregarded it.
No,
So,
they didn't. They didn't disregard
it.
They didn't
They looked
believe
at the
it.
evidence.
They didn't believe it. And what you're doing, you're basically saying no man can ever be on a jury fairly in a case like this. There's no
Right.
evidence to suggest that whatsoever. The evidence
I never
was
said
the
no
evidence
man. I
on the
never
evidence
said no
that
man. I said no
Ariel,
man can understand.
Ariel, on the evidence that was presented, if I'd been on that jury, I'd have come to the same conclusion.
A man, I would assume a man would.
Actually,
So
most women,
for you to say that,
most
Piers,
women
means
I
nothing.
know, most women I know who
This is
study the
pathetic.
evidence properly also reach that conclusion.
Listen, anybody who's currently being represented by her, you might as well just, you know what I mean, get your money back. You just go submit with somebody else. Her argumentative style, it's clear she doesn't care about evidence and or receipts. Right, there's both men and women that are just like, Cassie was a thought rocket. She liked a lot of that shit. Looking at the evidence. But yeah, if you got a civil case with her, don't even waste your time, Chief, all right? That's going to be a complete waste of your future. Shout out to Piers.
And it's some men I talk to who reach the opposite. So I'm not saying any men or all men, because every person is different. But what I'm saying is men in general who don't, the men who I know who do understand had women who experienced that, like their mothers. So they experience that in tandem with their mothers. So they have a better understanding of how abuse works, how the cycle of abuse works, how women typically go back to their abusers. But outside of that, you asked me about how did this affect my clients and our cases moving forward. It does not. This case had no effect and would have no effect. We have our own bars that we need to meet in terms of the preponderance of the evidence that we need to reach in our cases. And we are also glad, just in the same voice with Mrs. Ventura, that Diddy will be going to jail. He has skirted, and for there to be this assertion that Diddy has been this law-abiding citizen who hasn't been through this multiple times before, this is really just the only time he got caught up. So I think all of that will affect him, and we are very happy to see him be convicted. We are very happy to see what type of jail time he faces, and we are more excited to litigate our cases against him.
Yeah, Diddy's got nothing to worry about if this is the type of caliber of lawyer that is going to be coming up against him. But the logic here is just simply incredible. So because men in general don't have a woman's experience, then they can't look at the evidence and then determine whether or not there was coercion versus not coercion. Your logic is exactly what Piers is saying. No man is fit to stand trial on a case of trafficking or estitution. Apparently, a new section should be added to the bar exam, which is the accountability exam. You just put it on to the last section. Make it required for all 50 states that give out the bar exam, because this woman clearly lacks accountability. And I tell you what, for her and her thoughts to reach this stage is actually a dangerous thing to think about. But listen, at the end of the day, lesson of the day is that logic will beat emotion in any courtroom. And the sooner that you accept that, the better off that you will be. False accusations, emotionally charged rants or arguments, and courtroom theatrics are not justice. They're distractions. When your representation is more concerned with looking woke than being right, you will lose every time. Because real power isn't how loud that you scream your so-called truths. It's how well that your case is presented. From a defense perspective, they presented Cassie in a way a compelling way to demonstrate no coercion. All right, guys, that's what I believe my thoughts here today. Drop me your questions, comments, concerns in the comment box down below. Let's have a fantastic conversation in regards to this content. Tell me what you think. Make sure that you put the timestamp down there as well so I know exactly which portion of the content that you are speaking about. All right? Until next time, YouTube. Peace.
She belongs to the street.
Girl, don't hold my hand. You a mattress actress on the OnlyFans. Get your money, girl, but damn, how is that your only plan? What you gonna do when you get too old to strip and dance? Get up out your echo chamber screaming period and yes. You a low down dirty woman if you try to get knocked up by a high value man.